I stepped out of the terminal, dragging my bags behind me. The weight of everything felt like it was crushing me, but I didn't show it. Not to anyone. Not yet. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to the family group chat. "Just landed. Anyone able to pick me up?" Luke replied almost immediately. "Sorry, man. Too busy. Got stuff going on. Hope you make it home all right." No surprise. He always had something going on. I stared at the screen for a beat, then opened my dad's contact. His response was worse. "You should have planned better. We all have our lives to manage. Shouldn't have waited till last minute." The word stung more than I expected, but I pushed it down. Always did. Always had to. I felt the tightness in my chest. I'd just buried Rebecca, my wife. She was gone. And now I couldn't even get a damn ride from my own family. But I didn't have the energy to argue, to tell them how much they'd failed me. So I just put the phone back in my pocket, grabbed my bags, and walked toward the exit. The last few days with Rebecca haunted me. She'd been in so much pain, her eyes so tired, and when she said goodbye before I left, I never could have known it would be the last time. I hated myself for not seeing it. I hated myself for not staying longer, for thinking I had more time. The family chat was still there in my notifications. I clicked on it without thinking. There were more messages. Luke had sent something about the funeral arrangements, but the words blurred as I read them. I barely even registered what they said. My mind was too foggy. And then another message from my dad. "Can't believe we're doing this overseas. Should have been more careful with the timing." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the parking lot, but I didn't. I just stared at the screen, feeling numb, drained. I didn't have anything left to give. I took a long breath, swiping my thumb over the screen to close it. Then I turned and stepped out into the night. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of everything I was carrying. I was still carrying her things, in some small way. But mostly I was just carrying all this loss. No one from my family was here, and no one was going to be. I walked through the quiet parking lot, the weight of my bags pulling at my shoulders. For a moment, I wasn't at the airport anymore. My mind was back in that small house we'd built together, the house we'd dreamed of, the house we made our home. We met in college, both of us kind of awkward in the beginning, but we clicked instantly. Shared sense of humor, similar interests, books, movies, random late-night debates. It was like we always knew each other, even though we hadn't. After graduation, things fell into place faster than we'd expected. Rebecca landed the marketing director job, and I found my rhythm as an IT consultant. Not glamorous, but it paid the bills. We worked hard for everything we had. The house wasn't much, but it was ours. 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, but the backyard, Rebecca's garden, made it feel like we were somewhere bigger, somewhere warmer. I could still see her out there, early mornings, planting, trimming, or just sitting there, staring at the flowers. She'd laugh and tell me it was her version of meditation. I'd smile, telling her she was crazy for spending that much time digging around in dirt. But it wasn't about the dirt. It was about having something to nurture, something to control, something to make grow. We'd talk about starting a family, making plans that felt real. But then she got the promotion, the one that pulled her away more, made her work longer hours, kept her too busy to really think about anything else. The first few months, it was fine. We made do. But things shifted, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Maybe we'll just wait until next year," Rebecca had said one night, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. It was late, both of us still working. "I want to give this job my full attention. It's a big opportunity, you understand, right?" Of course I understood, or at least I told myself I did. I supported her, always did. But something in me felt like it was slipping. I hadn't said it out loud, but I felt it. We were drifting, even if we didn't want to admit it. She was caught up in her success, and I was caught in something else. Loneliness, maybe, or just the pressure of knowing that all our plans were being pushed back, again. But I never said it. I swallowed it down and nodded. "I get it," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though I wasn't sure if I did. Then, one evening, just a few months later, Rebecca came home, her face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in a while. "I've been offered a job in Singapore," she said, like it was nothing, like it wasn't going to change everything. I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard right. "Singapore?" She nodded, grinning. Yeah, it's huge. It's a big deal for my career. I felt this knot in my stomach, this deep sinking feeling. And what about us? I asked, forcing the words out. What about everything we've been planning? She looked at me, her smile faltering just a bit. I know it's a lot, Jim, but this could be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that we had our own once-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, together. But I didn't. I just nodded again, because that's what I did. Okay, I said, quieter than I meant to, if it's what you want. It wasn't just that I was willing to support her. I was scared of the idea of her leaving, of what it would do to us. But I was even more terrified of being the one to hold her back. So I stayed quiet. And just like that, everything changed. She went, and I stayed behind. I didn't fight her on the decision to go. I should have, maybe, but I didn't. It was a big opportunity after all. Rebecca was driven, and I knew it would mean a lot to her. She'd promised we'd make it work, that we'd visit each other whenever we could, that the distance wouldn't change anything. I told myself I was okay with it. I was being supportive. I worked remotely for a while, taking trips to Singapore every few months to see her. But the visits never felt long enough. The time together always seemed rushed, like we were trying to cram years of connection into a few days. When I was back home, I kept busy with work, pouring myself into long hours, doing whatever I could to distract myself from how empty the house felt without her. The bed was too big, the mornings too quiet. We'd video call every night, but even those calls started to feel hollow after a while. She'd talk about work, about her colleagues, the things she was doing. I'd listen, try to keep up, but more and more, it felt like she was somewhere else, living her life without me in it. Everything's going well, she'd say, eyes bright, her voice full of excitement. It's a challenge, but I love it. I'd smile, forcing my own excitement, even though I felt a sinking heaviness in my chest every time I heard it. That was how it went for months. I couldn't tell if she was getting more distant or if I was just losing touch with her in my head. I never used to feel like this, like I was trying to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore. And then, one evening, just after a call where she seemed more distant than usual, I got the message. Jim, I've been having these headaches. I don't know. I'm just so tired all the time. I frowned at the screen, unsure of what I was reading. What kind of headaches? Just intense. I'll be fine. It's probably just the stress of everything. The words didn't sit right. They never did. She'd always been the strong one, the one who powered through. To hear her talk like this, it made something inside me twist. Maybe you should see a doctor, I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady, like I wasn't already imagining worst-case scenarios. I will, I promise. She gave me that familiar, reassuring smile. Don't worry, I'm fine. But I did worry. I worried the moment we hung up, and the worry only grew when the call didn't come the next night. Then, the next morning, my phone rang. It was Rebecca's coworker. Jim, Rebecca, she collapsed. They're saying it's serious. We're getting her to the hospital now. The world shifted under my feet, and for a second, I didn't know how to breathe. I'm booking a flight, I said, trying to hold on to some piece of control, even though my hands were shaking. I barely made it through the rest of the day. The meeting I had lined up felt like it was happening in someone else's life. I couldn't focus, couldn't process anything. The only thing on my mind was Rebecca. The headache, the call, the hospital. By the time I got the news from her coworker that she'd collapsed, everything in me froze. My hands shook as I pulled up flights, as I punched in my details, as I raced to book the next available ticket. I had to get there. I had to see her. I felt like I was drowning in this urgency that didn't make sense. But I couldn't think. Couldn't stop myself from moving. I'd never felt so helpless in my life, even though I was doing everything I could to get to her. The flight took forever. My mind kept flashing back to her voice earlier, laughing off the headache. How she'd always been so strong, so damn strong. But then, when I landed in Singapore and rushed to the hospital, it all hit me like a brick. The doctors were quiet, too serious. We did everything we could, one of them said, his eyes avoiding mine. The aneurysm was too severe. We were unable to operate in time. I didn't hear much after that. My heart stopped beating for a few seconds. I could feel my skin getting cold. I kept waiting for someone to tell me this wasn't real, that they'd made a mistake, but no one did. She was in a coma, but they didn't think she'd make it. 5 days later, the machines flatlined. I sat by her bed, my hand gripping hers, not knowing what to do, what to say. The grief felt like it was crushing me, a weight that pressed down on my chest and my lungs, making it hard to breathe. I kept hoping she'd wake up. She had to. She was Rebecca, my wife, my partner. But she didn't. After 5 days, I was sitting there, numb, when the doctor came in to confirm what I already knew. There was no coming back from this. I stayed in Singapore for the next few days, trying to process it all. I had to arrange the funeral, the paperwork, everything. And the language barrier made it worse. Everything felt like a wall I couldn't get over. I wanted to go home, but there was no home left. Not without her. I called my family, but their responses were distant. Luke barely acknowledged what had happened, telling me to take care of things, and that he'd be around when I got back. My parents? They left me a voicemail, offering their condolences in a tone so flat it could have been a script. I was alone. Alone in a country that wasn't mine, surrounded by people who weren't my family. And I had no idea how to move forward from this, how to keep going. I had to handle everything, every last detail, on my own. No one was there to help. Not in any meaningful way. Not in the way I needed. I was alone in a tiny rented apartment, surrounded by paperwork and things that reminded me of Rebecca. Her clothes still scattered around the apartment, her shoes at the door, even her toothpaste on the bathroom counter. It was suffocating, but it was all I had left. I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. Not while everything still smelled like her. The funeral arrangements were a nightmare. I could barely understand what I was supposed to do. Forms, signatures, official stamps, they all blurred together. I kept trying to communicate with the officials, but the language barrier made every conversation feel like I was miles underwater, struggling to make myself heard. I'd send texts to my family, asking for help. It felt like I was begging them for some kind of support, but all I got back were responses that made it clear they were just going through the motions. Luke sent a message a couple of days after Rebecca's passing. You should hire a service to handle the details. That way, you can get back home faster. It made my blood boil. I was already drowning in the reality of losing Rebecca. And here he was, telling me to rush through it, to move on. I didn't respond to him right away. There was nothing to say. My parents sent a generic text. We're thinking of you. Let us know if you need anything. There was nothing personal about it, nothing real. It felt like they were just saying the right words, but I could hear the distance in their tone. I didn't need them to tell me what they were thinking. I needed them to show up. But they weren't showing up. Every phone call, every text, just served as a reminder of how alone I really was in all this. I wasn't angry anymore, just hollow, completely empty. I had no one here, and I wasn't sure I ever would. A few days later, the financial strain hit like a punch to the gut. The bills from the hospital, the funeral, the costs of flying her back to the States. It was all adding up fast. I didn't know how I was going to cover it. I'd set aside savings for emergencies, but this was beyond anything I'd prepared for. I went through the numbers again and again, but it didn't make sense. I'd spent all I could on the essentials. I had no choice but to dip into the rest of my savings, and even that felt like it wouldn't be enough for much longer. The isolation hit me harder after that, as the weight of everything, Rebecca, her death, the money, the loneliness, pressed down on me. It felt like the walls of this foreign city were closing in around me, like I was suffocating under all of it, and I still couldn't get a single person to stand beside me. I thought about going back home, to try and reconnect with family, but the thought of facing them, of having to explain what had happened, what I was going through, it didn't seem worth it. They hadn't been here when it mattered, and they wouldn't be there when I got back either. So I stayed. I didn't know what else to do. I stayed in that tiny apartment, clinging to the memory of Rebecca, because that was all I had left. I finally arranged for Rebecca's burial in Singapore. It felt like the right thing to do, even though it drained what was left of my savings. She'd wanted it here, and despite everything, despite how hard it was, I knew I had to honor that. It was the last thing I could do for her. But nothing was simple. More forms, more lines to sign. Every day I sat in government offices, waiting. The language barrier made everything feel like an obstacle I couldn't get over, like I was just spinning my wheels, going nowhere. The embassy, the funeral home, even the simple task of getting her things together, it was all exhausting. I'd lost track of how many days I'd spent just trying to get the paperwork sorted. It felt like I was losing my grip on everything. I'd never felt so alone in my life. I looked at the documents in my hands, Rebecca's final wishes, her burial arrangements, and I wondered how I'd ended up here, alone. I'd never felt more isolated, and every hour that passed was another reminder that, in the end, it was only me dealing with all of it. The physical toll was starting to show. I wasn't eating, barely sleeping. Every step felt heavier. Every breath felt harder to take, but I had to keep going. I had no choice. Eventually, everything was set, and I booked my flight home. 30 hours of travel, 3 layovers, no rest, just a constant churn of exhaustion and thoughts I couldn't escape. I kept thinking about my family, about how, through all of this, I'd had to carry everything by myself. When I called them, their voices were distant, like they couldn't be bothered. Luke was busy with work. My parents they weren't really there. And the worst part, I didn't know if I could blame them. They never gave me what I needed, but maybe I was the one who expected too much. I didn't know what was worse, the pain of losing Rebecca, or the crushing realization that my family had failed me when I needed them most. The flight dragged on. The minutes felt like hours. My body was on autopilot, but my mind was stuck. Stuck on all the missed opportunities, all the things I hadn't said to her, all the things I hadn't done. And then, just as the plane touched down, I got a message. Luke. Hey, you get in okay? Got a lot going on, but we should catch up soon. You know, whenever you have time. I stared at the screen. Whenever you have time. I couldn't believe it. My wife was dead. I'd just buried her, alone, in a foreign country. And this was the message I got? I shoved the phone back into my pocket. I was done. Done with the expectations, the distance, the complete lack of real support. I was alone, and it felt like it had always been this way. When I stepped off the plane, it was like the weight of the last few weeks slammed into me all at once. The exhaustion, the grief, the anger. Everything hit me as I walked through the terminal. I dragged my bags behind me, each step feeling heavier than the last. I looked around for a familiar face, for someone. But there was no one. I checked my phone. Nothing from Luke, nothing from my parents. It wasn't a surprise, but it still stung. I should have known by now that no one would be there. Then, a text from Luke popped up. I'm really busy. You should just take an Uber. Hope everything's good. I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the message. The words felt like a slap in the face. I was coming back from burying my wife. My wife? And this was how he thought to handle it? I couldn't respond, couldn't bring myself to. I opened the messages from my parents. We've got a lot going on here. Can you make it home okay? My mom wrote. Maybe we can catch up this weekend, my dad added. I felt a dull ache in my chest as I read those messages, but I didn't react, not outwardly. The words blurred as I scrolled through them, my brain struggling to process the complete absence of anything real, the emptiness of their concern. It was like they weren't even trying. I stood there, frozen for a moment, and let out a long, shaky breath. This was it. This was how it was going to be. Alone. Again. I started gathering my things, hands shaking, and as I tugged at one of the bags, the zipper gave way. Rebecca's things spilled onto the airport floor, her sweater, a book she'd been reading, the travel pillow we'd gotten together for our first trip abroad. The sight of it, her things, made my chest tighten, and before I could stop myself, I dropped to my knees. I didn't care who saw me. I couldn't hold it together anymore. The grief hit me like a wave, crashing over everything I'd been holding in for so long. I wasn't just grieving Rebecca. I was grieving the fact that I'd buried her alone, in a foreign country. I was grieving the fact that, even now, my family couldn't find the time to show up for me. I was grieving that this was my life now, this broken, lonely existence. I wanted to scream, to break something, to make the world understand how much pain I was in. But all I could do was sit there, surrounded by her things, feeling the weight of everything I had lost. And then, just as I sat there, barely able to breathe through the tears, I felt a hand on my shoulder. "Hey," a voice said, soft but firm. "You okay?" I looked up, still choking on my breath. A stranger, an airport worker maybe, was standing there, crouched down beside me. He wasn't rushing me, wasn't judging me, just there. I didn't say anything at first, too caught up in the mess I was. But he didn't pull away. He just reached down, helping me gather Rebecca's things, handing me her book gently, like it mattered. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice quiet. "I don't know what you're going through, but I can help." For a second, I couldn't even process what he was saying. The simple act of someone, anyone, showing some kind of compassion, it felt like a slap in the face. My family hadn't even done this much, but there, in the middle of the airport, a stranger was showing more kindness than I'd gotten in weeks, maybe even longer. I nodded, still feeling hollow, still drowning in everything I'd lost. But as I gathered her things, slowly putting them back in the bag, I realized something. I didn't have to carry this weight alone forever. It might have been all I knew for so long, but maybe, just maybe, there was another way forward. I didn't know what that way looked like, but for the first time in a long time, I thought maybe I could find it. Tim didn't ask a lot of questions. He just helped me pick up Rebecca's things, carefully, like they mattered. Maybe it was because they did to him, or maybe because he could see how broken I was. I wasn't used to that kind of quiet attention, and I felt myself crumbling under it, like I could finally breathe for the first time in days. "Here," Tim said softly, handing me Rebecca's sweater. "I can help you get this stuff together." "Thanks," I muttered, swallowing down the lump in my throat. I didn't know what to say. I was fine, I told myself. But I wasn't. I was so far from fine, I couldn't even begin to describe it. You doing okay?" Tim asked as he grabbed the last of the things off the floor. I wasn't used to people asking that. Really asking. I'd barely gotten a decent response from anyone in my family, and here was this stranger, putting himself out there, acting like he cared. I didn't know how to answer, but I didn't want to lie. Not to him. Not now. "No," I said, my voice cracking a little. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. "No, I'm not. No one's here for me, my family. They haven't been around." Tim nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. "That's rough, man. I'm sorry you're going through that. But I'm here, okay?" It felt like a punch to the gut. His words were so simple, but they hit harder than anything I'd heard from my family in weeks. I felt my chest tighten. "No one's picking me up. I'm supposed to get an Uber, but I don't know. It doesn't matter." Tim didn't hesitate. "I'll wait with you. No problem. You shouldn't be alone." For a second, I couldn't process it. Why was this guy staying? Why was he going out of his way to help a total stranger? "I really appreciate it," I said, trying to gather myself. He gave me a half smile, shrugging it off. "It's the least I can do. I'm just doing my job." But it wasn't just that. It wasn't just a job. He was there for me in a way my own family hadn't been. And in that moment, I realized how much I'd been relying on them for support, hoping they would step up, would be there when I needed them most. But they hadn't. They hadn't shown up for me when it mattered, and that was something I was starting to accept. When my Uber finally pulled up, I looked at Tim, feeling a strange sense of gratitude that I wasn't sure how to express. "Thank you," I said again, a little louder this time. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Tim gave me a nod, his voice steady. "Take care of yourself, okay?" I stepped into the Uber, watching him walk back to his post, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely lost. I had a long road ahead of me, but as the car pulled away from the airport, I realized something. I couldn't keep waiting for my family to come around. I couldn't keep hoping they'd fill the hole inside me. It wasn't their fault. They couldn't be who I needed them to be. But maybe that was okay. Maybe it was time to stop searching for validation from people who weren't ready to give it. As the city lights blurred past, I made a decision. I was done looking backward. It was time to face forward, time to find my own way. Maybe that meant leaving my family behind. Maybe it meant figuring out what I wanted without them. I wasn't sure yet, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep waiting. And for the first time, that felt like a weight lifted. A few weeks later, I finally left the hotel and went back to the house. It didn't feel like mine anymore. Not with all the empty spaces where Rebecca's things used to be. Not with the silence that hung in the air. But I couldn't stay in a hotel forever. I needed to be home, even if it felt wrong. The first few days were quiet. The kind of quiet that sat in your chest and wouldn't let go. I moved through the house like a ghost, sorting through things, trying to figure out what to keep, what to toss. The decision-making wasn't easy, but I was getting used to it. I didn't have anyone to make those choices for me anymore. Then the calls came. Luke reached out again, the first one after all the distance. "Hey man, I've been thinking, you should let me handle things. I can take care of the estate, the paperwork, all that stuff. You don't need to be doing all this alone." I could hear the tone in his voice, the urgency, the control. It wasn't about me. It was about him taking charge, about appearing like the good brother, the one who had it all together. He always had a plan, always had a way of stepping in when he thought it was necessary. But this time, I wasn't interested in being his project. "I've got it," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "I'm handling everything. I don't need your help." He pushed a little harder, but I didn't let him change my mind. "Jim, I get it, but you're not thinking straight. Let me help you, okay?" I didn't even flinch. "No, I don't need you to fix things. I need to do this on my own." I hung up the phone before he could say anything else. It felt like a small victory, but it was a victory all the same. For the first time in a long time, I was taking control of my life. I didn't need to depend on my family anymore. Not for validation, not for help, not for anything. They had already shown me who they were. My parents reached out too, but it was the same story. They said they were sorry for everything I'd been through, but then they shifted the conversation to their own lives, their own schedules, their own plans. The distance in their voices was deafening. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. It just confirmed what I already knew. My family was not the support system I needed. They were always too busy, too distracted, and I was done hoping they would change. I didn't cut them off immediately, but I started to pull back. I stopped responding to their half-hearted attempts at communication. I stopped waiting for them to come through. Instead, I found other people. I reached out to friends from work, a few neighbors who'd always been friendly, but I'd never really gotten to know. People who showed up, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They didn't make me feel like a burden. They didn't act like they were doing me a favor by checking in. They just cared. It was small, but it was enough. It was what I needed. I started going out more, finding things to do that didn't involve sitting alone in a house full of memories. I joined a local gym, started running again, taking care of my body the way I should have been all along. I spent weekends fixing things around the house. Small repairs, nothing big. But it was something to focus on, something to keep me moving forward. I didn't need my family to rebuild. I was doing it on my own, step by step, and it felt damn good. 6 months had passed since I started putting my life back together. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but I was in a better place than I had been. I'd found a new job in a new city, a place where I could start fresh. The work was good, the people were decent, and slowly I was building a life that wasn't defined by grief. I had a solid group of friends now, people who were genuinely there for me, who checked in, who didn't make me feel like I was a project to fix. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. I was living. It was a Saturday morning when the letter came. I had just finished my run, sweat dripping down my face as I wiped it off with the back of my hand. The mailbox was an old wooden one, and I had gotten into the habit of checking it only once a week, so I wasn't expecting much. I opened it, saw the familiar handwriting on the envelope, and my stomach tightened. It was from my father. I stood there, holding it, not sure what to feel. After everything, the distance, the silence, the indifference, they were now reaching out. It wasn't even a call or a text, a letter, like that was going to fix things. I went back inside, sat down at the kitchen table, and opened it. "Jim," it started, the words almost too formal. "I know I've failed you. I know I haven't been there when you needed me, and for that, I'm sorry." I skimmed through the rest, his apology feeling hollow. He talked about wanting to reconnect, to make things right. But there was no mention of the years of distance, no real explanation for why he'd stayed absent when I needed him most. I set the letter down and stared at it, my finger running over the edge of the paper. Part of me wanted to call him, to scream at him for everything he hadn't done. But that wasn't the path I was on anymore. I didn't immediately respond. I couldn't. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just indifferent. And maybe that was worse. It wasn't just about what he'd done to me. It was about what I had to do for myself. I'd spent so long chasing after their approval, hoping for their support, waiting for them to show up. But I couldn't keep doing that. I couldn't keep letting them define my worth. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to let my family dictate the terms of my life anymore. I wasn't going to let their absence or their conditional love keep me from moving forward. I crumpled up the letter and tossed it in the trash. It wasn't about burning bridges. It was about setting boundaries. And that was something I had to learn the hard way. I changed into dry clothes, went out for another run, feeling lighter than I had in a long time. My lungs burned as I pushed myself harder, my body moving in sync with the rhythm of my thoughts. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need anyone to validate my existence. Family wasn't about blood. It was about who shows up when it matters. And in that moment, I knew that I had found my real family, people who had been there for me, who had seen me at my worst and still chose to stay. And that was enough.